Alright, welcome to CrawlForce. Hopefully if you're watching this video, you've either already purchased the CrawlBox or you're getting prepped for it when it arrives. Pretty simple process of install. On this video we'll have some pictures of the car put together and then torn apart as far as you need to go. But just a quick explanation. Basically you want to take out passenger seat, passenger side plastics behind and under the seat, and the tunnel plastic. That way it allows you easy access into the car. And after that, basically all you're going to do is remove the factory driveline, factory clutch cover, and then you're going to start the install of the CrawlBox itself. So without wasting any more time, let's go ahead and jump into the video of the install. Here we go. All right, so first thing you want to do once all your plastics and everything out of the way is you got six 6mm bolts right here on the flywheel. Get those removed. They should be in there pretty good. The good idea is to hold the flywheel, give some pressure on it, pop it loose, get them out. Now obviously this car has been removed and installed many times, so hopefully yours will be a little tighter than these. But we'll get these all out, and once I get the driveline out of there, we'll click back in and let you see what's going on next. All right, so once you get the driveline out of place, there's a 19mm bolt inside of here. Get your gun on. There you go, 19mm out. Take that bolt out. Remove the driveline flange, get it out of your way. Then what you're gonna do, after that's all out of the way, you have 8mm bolts all the way around your stock clutch cover. Remove all those 8mm bolts to get your stock setup out of the way. Then I'm not going to bore you with taking all these out. We'll come back to the video as soon as I get them out and get ready to remove the cover. All right, so once you get all of the 8mm out of the way, get ready to take off your last one. Good idea to throw a couple shop towels at the very bottom. You will get a little bit of oil coming out. It shouldn't be much unless your transmission's way overfilled, but just to catch it so it's not on all over your pan. So take out your final 8mm. Now if your car is factory, it could rip your stock clutch cover gasket, so it's a good idea to have one before you start the install. Most of our cars run an aftermarket gasket, so it's usually not too bad. But once you remove it, pull out the stock clutch cover, get it out of the way. This whole assembly is going to no longer be used. And this is what it should look like. So you have your clutch, driveline flange removed. You can see that the gasket is still on here. And then driveline's removed. Everything's ready to go. So now you're ready to start the process of the new installation. Now one thing on the new version CrawlBox is you have two dowel pins in here. You have one here and one up here. Those you can remove. You will not need them. To make installing the gasket a little easier and holding everything in place, a little bit of gasket maker material or little gasket retainer. We'll have a link of what's some stuff that's good to use. But if you put a little on there, put your gasket in place, it'll hold it in place. And then when you go to install the new setup, it's a little easier to get to. But I'll go ahead and grab the CrawlBox and start the install. So hold on, be right back. Okay, so now everything's ready to go. You grab your clutch cover with the adapter plate, there is 3 bolts that you can leave in on your clutch cover to adapter plate setup. Okay, it's 2 short bolts and 1 little bit, actually it's pretty short too, but it's 1 longer, 2 shorts. It basically just locates the clutch cover on. Don't over crank them, but definitely have them in and snug so it's ready to go. And then you take this, slide it into place. Okay, and once it's located in place, you grab your 5mm Allen bolts that come with the kit. You start sliding them into place here. Everything you want to do, you want to just get it in by hand. You don't want to over crank any one until they are all in place. And everything should go in pretty straightforward, simple. Once you get them sort of snugged up, you should be able to let go of it. You go ahead and continue on. All right, so once you get all those bolts in and they're still loose, you should have a little bit of jiggle room here. Okay, what you want to do is you need to drop gearbox assembly in place. This will allow it to center on the transmission itself. Okay, a little tight, but they go right in. Grab it, spin the gear, the driveline a little bit, make sure it's seated all the way in, make sure there's really no major gaps here. Then what you want to do is grab one of your spacers, put it down in here, and like I said, this space does vary depending on the car, so if you have to sand it down a little bit, it should be okay. But we found at least 3 different sizes so far on cars. We're hoping to provide a few different ones, but at least have it in place to where it's there and you don't have to wedge it in later. Once it's in place, go ahead and snug up at least 3 or 4 of these bolts. Got a couple up top. I usually like to get 3 up top because it locates it pretty good. Now you're not over tightening them, you're just snugging them up to where things, you know, don't move when you remove the driveline or the gearbox back out. Get one at least down here. Okay. Okay, there we go. I've got 4 in good. Now it's located. Now go ahead and grab this assembly. Be careful with the actuator. Grab this assembly, give it a little bit of jiggle. It'll come back out. Remove it back out of the car for later on once you're all done. Now go ahead, go through all of these and start tightening them up. I like to use either a 5mm Allen socket setup with a short stubby, works well. Also a 5mm Allen setup with a long, works well too, gets in around the car. The other thing you have to do too is you have located in here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, hopefully you can see them in the video, but we got 4 bolts that go in here. Those 4 bolts hold this side of the adapter plate. Then all your stock or all your clutch cover bolts in the stock locations hold the rest of the assembly. So now that we've got some of those snugged up, I'm going to go ahead and get the short bolts in, because that's the last thing you want to do is forget these. That's the reason you have to remove the setup. Everything should always go in by hand pretty easy. So just kind of get them in, get them all into place. As long as you get them started, you can always hit them with the gun afterwards. And this basically hooks all the adapter assembly on. All right, so now that I've got them started, go ahead and get these all in. We found that the Milwaukee torque settings, actually, when it runs out, is actually pretty good setup for these. We've never had one come loose yet. Usually like to just give it a tiny little twist afterwards just to make sure everything's in solid. All right, so that's the 4 that go behind the gearbox assembly. Now the rest is just getting the last ones in. Make sure that these are all in and tight now. Little snug, make sure everything's good. Okay, that's all good. The short adapter up on the top ones with the battery box definitely helps out. And the CrawlBox does allow you to remove the clutch cover itself with everything else installed. So if you're doing a clutch job or anything like that, you can still do it. Pretty similar to what the service manual says. You're just removing our clutch cover instead of theirs. But the rest of the process would be the same. And like I said, if you just kind of feel your way around it, you'll find them all. That way you don't have to remove the entire driver's side if you don't want to, or the skid plate. All right, so we've gone all the way around. All of them are in. You double check the ones that were stationary. Make sure that everything's on. And now you should have pretty much all your bolts in place. There's one more bolt down here by the driveline. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but it's right here. It doesn't go through the actual clutch cover or the adapter plate. It's actually at the bottom edge of the adapter plate. There's one shorter bolt that you'll have that slides into there. It's basically right above and to the passenger side of the driveline. So that's the last one in. Once you get that in place, you're good to go. Okay, so that one's in. So now all bolts are in place, clutch cover's on, and you're back to setup. Now it's time to install the gearbox itself. I'll grab that and we'll continue on. All right, so now once you've got the clutch cover, adapter plate, everything all installed, now it's time to actually install the gearbox itself. Now on the gearbox, there is one bolt there's 4 total, but there's one bolt back here inside that's the hardest to get to. The best thing to do is to get a straight 5mm, something similar to this, that you can put the bolt on, and that's the first one you want to get in place. So you're going to have 3 short bolts and 1 longer bolt and a spacer. And hopefully you can see in this video. So we've got a spacer with the long bolt and then 3 shorter bolts. That's all that there is to hold the actual gearbox itself onto the adapter plate. So we're going to start with one of the small ones. Set the other ones aside for the moment. Now what I do to make it a little easier is the blind bolt, which you can see right here. It's down on driver's side. If you do a little paint mark on it with a paint marker pen, it helps you identify where that's at, because it's hidden between the clutch cover itself and the gear assembly. So it's actually this one right here. So what I do is I pop it into place, make it a little easier to find it, and I've got my little paint mark. Take this, drop it into place, and just be sure not to push that bolt out. Get it splined back on, slide it in. It should go in pretty easy. If you don't push it in all the way, you won't pop that bolt out. Grab this, grab your Allen, get it into place using that paint as a marker, and then if you jiggle it into place, you can go ahead and spin it by hand to at least get it started. Once it's started, the rest is pretty easy. Okay, I believe I have it in place. Now you can come in with a longer swivel setup. Make it easier to spin and kind of jiggle the whole assembly, making sure you're splined on, making sure everything's in place. I've got that snugged up just a little bit. Make sure you don't pull on your electrical. for the actuator. Now, next thing you want to do is you want to work on this one that has the little spacer. So take the spacer and the bolt, and that's your longer one. Get it into place. Spacer, like I said, if it's a little tight, shave it off a little bit, but you want it definitely in there. Put it in just like that. Get it in, snug it up a little bit. You definitely don't want to tighten up both sides independently. You want to make sure everything's seated all the way. And then one of your other short ones goes up here up top. Get that started. And then last one is down at the bottom, but on the passenger side. It's not too bad. You should be able to see it. Your gas tank bracket kind of blocks it a little bit, but it's not bad. Get that one started into place. Make sure everything's where it needs to be. Okay, now that I've got them all in, snugged up a little bit, now grab it and just kind of jiggle it again. Make sure you're fully seated. And then that's it. And then now you can go ahead and tighten them all up. I always start with the top one. Little extra twist. Grab your next one down. Bottom one. Okay, and then the hard one. I usually use a hand ratchet on that because I don't have room around the driveline. So I kind of sneak it in around here, make sure that I'm in my right spot because it's a ways in there. Hopefully you can see, tightening it up as we speak. Okay, there we go. And extra little snug right there. Just make sure you're good. Okay, so now your CrawlBox, gearbox assembly is installed, adapter plate, clutch plate, everything's installed. Now the next thing you want to do is grab the driveline flange, slide it back. It should slide right into place. And hold on. Now if for some reason yours is not perfectly lined up and you feel like you need to push this sideways, up and down to get it to line up, your engine is just out of alignment. Easy way to fix that is you loosen all your bolts on your motor mounts, grab the motor with a pry bar underneath, tilt it up a little bit, tilt it down a little bit, whatever it takes to get this to slide right in, just like you see here. Once it's slid into place, tighten all those bolts back up and it should remain that way. It's not, some of them are off from factory. We've seen cars that are brand new that are off, all the way up to ones that have been used a lot. So the goal is you want to make sure that it's lined up, slides right in nice and easy. Okay. Once it's in place, you grab your 6mm bolts that hold your driveline on. Now if your factory ones are good, factory ones are silver colored, just like I have here in my hand. As long as they're good and not stripped out, go ahead and use them. We prefer to use newer grade 8s. Just seems to work a little better for us. But our cars have been torn apart so many times. So once you get them in, get them all started by hand. And once they're all in place, then you go ahead and tighten them all up. And I won't bore you with getting these all tightened up, but the big thing you want to remember is always rotate your motor basically towards you. So if you're on the passenger side and you need to spin this, you want to spin it this direction only. Never spin it backwards. So You grab your 6mm stubby, and then you go ahead and just start tightening them up. Now, I recommend getting these a little tighter than normal. I also recommend using thread lock on them because they have a tendency of coming loose. Spin it this way so you can get to the next ones. Sometimes it's a little harder, just depends on what your compression is. Okay. Refer to your service manual as far as torque specs. Once they're all in and good to go, you have all 6 in place. Basically, that is the installation of the CrawlBox itself. Your electronics are going to hook up for your shifting, which will be in a whole different video. But basically, since this car has already been set up, you plug in your actuator, which allows it to shift high range, low range. You will also have a ground wire. If it's a 3-pedal car, that ground wire can be hooked to a light. So every single time this is in low range, this little nub right here will ground out, allowing your light to come on. If you have an SS model, this ground will also trigger your GSC module, allowing it to go into the second map, which will shift it in to low range and run your second map. Make sure that's on, good and tight. And then this is your vent line setup, where we recommend a vent setup with a catch can. You can run just a filter at the top if you want. It's pretty much whatever it is that the owner wants to do. In this particular vehicle, we do have a catch can mounted behind the passenger seat on the frame rail. You just thread it on here, and once it's on, snug it up, and technically that is a full installation of the CrawlBox. You are ready to go. So now 1-to-1 in high range, you're the same car you've always had. Once you go into low range, you have a 3-to-1 ratio in all 5 gears. And now you can go out and play and hit pretty much any kind of trail there is. Thank you for watching.